Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy-to-understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, we are back for another episode of the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. I am Greer Howard, and I'm with Bobby Buchanan. Bobby, how are you doing today?
Greer, I'm doing great. It is the new year when we're shooting this, and I'm feeling like we're off and running at this point, and excited to see what this year brings. So this is, I think, a good topic to start with.
Yes, well, it is great to be back with you, Bobby. And so today we're going to be talking about what does fair actually mean when you're going through a divorce. And, Bobby, we always start with, it is no surprise that divorce can be very overwhelming. There can be some fear involved. There can be a lot of, emotions that come up. And one of the things that I feel like, pops up a lot in conversation is that they want the divorce to be fair. And fairness could really be different depending on who you are, what your situation is, and the two spouses may not see fair the same way. The court may not seem fair the same way. So we're going to break it all down today. First of all, let's just kind of talk through, Bobby, in your experience, what would you say are some of the reasons or some of the, thoughts behind why people are so focused on that they want the divorce to be, quote, fair?
Yeah, I love this topic because I think it really dives into the most human elements of this experience. And as I was putting together the outline for this podcast, I was thinking about fairness and where these ideas come from, and really, like you said, what is fair to you versus what is fair to me might be completely different. The idea that things actually need to be fair or can be fair or should be fair, um, I think ultimately, like, this is the big takeaway. I'll just give it to you right off the bat, is the more that you can let go of the idea of fairness, the better you'll be through this process. Because ultimately, the word fair isn't found in divorce law, and where there's some analogous terms, and we'll talk about those, really equitable being the one that maybe we could substitute closely for fairness, where that is found, it doesn't always equal a result that you might want. And I think the more we can let go of the idea that this is going to be fair, the better off we'll be. I mean, where do we actually get this idea that things should be fair? I mean, as I was talking to you earlier, you start, when we're babies, things are fair. Like, that's when things are fair, when we want to make sure that two young siblings both have the same ice cream. If you get this thing, then they get that thing. And my son's 6, and we're already trying to break him of this notion that things will be fair. I mean, Nora just had her birthday. We just took her to the toy store to pick out her own gift, because why not? And Luke wanted to know, do I get to go and get a toy as well? And the answer was no. I mean, it would have been much easier to say yes and make him happy, but I'm a big proponent of getting my kids used to the fact that life isn't fair, and it's gonna be a little painful, because I think fairness is closely tied sometimes with disempowerment, or feeling like you're a victim of something. And the less we are attached to those notions, the more empowered we'll be to get through this process. So really interesting concept I think we're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that example, and truthfully, specifically because it's not about divorce. It's about another subject, your kids. And as adults, we look at that situation and we go, well, yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense. Like, Nora gets the present because it's her birthday, and her brother Luke doesn't get one because it's just not his birthday. You just don't get a gift when, it's Nora's turn. And so I love that, because I think sometimes, I think this is what you were kind of getting at, is that fairness, you feel like if it's not fair, then you're, like, getting taken advantage of, right? So, what you're saying is in the world of divorce, you don't necessarily have to get taken advantage of, like, for it to be fair. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really big ones, like, I mean, the biggest example that I can think of is there's the breadwinner. They've been married for 15 years, and the breadwinner is cheated on. And maybe the other side is a scoundrel, and they have done all these, like, they've been just really cruel to the breadwinner in the way that they've gone about this emotional or physical affair. That doesn't stop the fact that the breadwinner may still have to pay maintenance, like a lot of money to this other side, to this person that cheated on them. And that's Illinois law. I mean, in other states, they have said that it is we're a no fault state. Other states say, well, your infidelity is going to play a part in maintenance payments. Illinois is not the case. So you could say, well, that's just not fair. Well, I'll say to you, yeah, that's the law, and we're not going to be able to change it. So we need to let go of what we think is fair here and just look, practically speaking, at how we're going to get through this as quickly or as, you know, efficiently as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that all makes sense. Why don't we talk a little bit about, because I feel like fairness is in particularly, it's just a big deal. It feels very urgent at the beginning. I mean, I think maybe as people continue to get educated, I mean, as we're continuing to, like, we're getting a little educated from you right now, going, oh, okay, like some of this starts to make sense. But out the gate, I feel like there's this urgency for, things to be fair. So could you maybe talk a little bit about, fairness and maybe what that's actually going to look like?
Yeah, and I think out of the gate, the biggest reason we get attached to fairness is because of the fear of the unknown, and fairness often it's associated with, am I going to be okay?
Mm.
Am I gonna be protected? Am I gonna have enough? I mean, that's the same as Luke going, like, feeling that pain when we say you can't get a toy. Like, he's gonna wonder, is he gonna feel left out when Nora comes home with a toy and he doesn't have one? I mean, ultimately, these really primal feelings are the same thing across the board, whether or not we're thinking about, are we gonna have enough income or property or enough parenting time at the end of this? So and we could be also, this fear could be coming from the fact that our spouses told us these things about, you're not going to get a dime or you're not going to see the kids. And so then you're wondering, are those things true? Is the divorce process actually fair? Where am I going to end up? So all of those unknowns in the beginning can really make us latch on to this idea of fairness.
Yeah, I love that thought of, I mean, I think it's so true that the fairness is really attached to that fear. And, just because your spouse is saying some of those things to you doesn't mean that it's necessarily true, doesn't mean that it's the law. So I like how you kind of explain that. And I think when you put it in those terms of, you want it to be fair because you're fearful, it really kind of humanizes the situation a little bit, and you realize kind of the motivation behind why someone wants it, quote, fair. So why don't you kind of just talk about, kind of overview, what are those main areas that you think people are the most, like, kind of, quote, concerned about with fairness?
Yeah, well, let me just start this by saying that your divorce is not going to be fair. The property splitting that's going to happen is not going to be perfect. Who pays the individual bills while the divorce is going on, and whether or not you're overpaying, or you have less access to money than you did before. Like, the court nor your agreement with your spouse is going to get it perfect. That's just not how things work in life in general. I mean, a lot of people that are going through divorce, they maybe not don't have experience in like transactional things in general. Like, if you've never bought a house or bought a car yourself or negotiated a deal, you might not know that like these things are all really rough around the edges, and you're not going to get like, at the end of the day, we're talking about negotiating for, thousands of dollars. And if you get within a few thousand, depending on the size of the estate, that's as good as you're going to get. Like, there's no way that we're going to get down to the individual dollars or cents and get this perfect for you. And what happens to people is they want it to be perfect. And so they start like just over lawyering their case. So, um, we'll go down that rabbit hole a little bit more further in the episode. Um, but
Yeah, because I mean, my first thought of when you're over lawyering the case, I mean, you make it more expensive,
yeah,
right? Yeah. I
absolutely.
mean,
More
all of
expensive, takes longer, and it doesn't become inherently more fair. Um,
so we gotta let it go, okay? We're letting the fairness we gotta let the fairness go here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about, Illinois law specifically. And does Illinois law, I mean, let's just ask the question, do they care if it's fair? Is that the law?
The short answer is no. I mean, especially in the context of children. In the context of property, a little bit closer. I mean, it's called equitable division of property, but that's only marital property. And equitable, what that means isn't necessarily equal. So at least we have something there that, equitable could be substituted with the use of fair. But what a judge is actually looking at to decide what is equitable might not be the same things that you're looking at and or your spouse is looking at. So equitable, and again, what is fair is such a vague term. That's why I don't live my life thinking about whether or not what happened to me today was fair.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that happen
Yeah.
yeah, out of our control, truthfully.
Totally out of our control. I mean, I think honestly, the places where I have the only place that I clung, is that a word? Cling?
Clung? I think so. Yeah.
That I grabbed onto that word fair, um, is honestly when my sister got sick last year and she got cancer, and it just seemed incredibly unfair. But
Because it was.
because it was.
Yeah.
At the same time, I asked myself, well, was it like that's you know, it is unfair. I feel like I'm trying to get away from the word fair, but I think that that's like only one of the only places where we can say, well, that's definitely not fair. Or like children starving in war-torn countries is definitely not
Not fair.
fair. What did they do? But how your divorce shakes out, yeah, it's tough for you or anybody else to say what is fair. I mean, I don't know. I don't mean to for those listening to say I'm not compassionate towards what you've been through in your process of getting here and what has happened in your marriage. Certainly, your experience is valid, but don't rely on the court system to get things right and to make you feel like justified or whole or emotionally satisfied in this process. It's just not.
The court system is not gonna hand that to you, that's
No,
for sure.
absolutely not.
I wanna dig into this a little bit more where you said equitable does not equal equal. I don't know if I'm saying that correct. Could you give us maybe a little example or something, so that, for everyone out here that maybe isn't as, familiar with equitable, like, what would that maybe look like?
So I think one of the most common examples that can be used to describe what it means to be equitable rather than equal is when marital property is split rather than 50-50. It's split, let's say 70% to one side, 30% to another side. And that is done most commonly in situations where maybe one person makes a lot more money than the other person, or there's particular financial needs on one side versus the other. Let's say one side has a huge inheritance that is coming to them, already came to them, and that's non marital property. So it's not going to be split at all. So, in light of that, the judge decides that the marital property should be split 70-30 instead of 50-50. So that's the equitable part where instead of just taking what is marital property and splitting it down the middle, the judge and the lawyers and the parties negotiating can start to look at these other elements around to see if maybe that's going to push the needle one way or another. I would caution though that in 90% of cases, it doesn't push the needle and it's still a 50-50 split. So and your lawyer will explain this to you that if you're going in and you say, well, I want 80% of the property or 70% of the property, and I think I should get it because of X, Y, and Z, your lawyer is going to tell you, like, listen, I understand what you're saying, but if you want to make that happen, we're probably going to have to go to trial, and it's still going to be a flip of the coin, and it's going to be expensive to go to trial. So we can do that, but we should also see if we can maybe negotiate something. And instead of you getting 70%, let's see if we can get you to 60. And that might be the best result possible given the circumstances.
All right, so Bobby, this is our conversation is making me think about something, and I kind of want to ask you a question on the spot here. A friend of mine just sent me this book that I'm getting ready to read called One Word, and I know that it's kind of about picking a word for the year, right? And um, in this particular situation, I feel like in this conversation, our word that we're kind of focused on is fair, right? But we're asking people to let go of the word fair because the divorce process is just not fair. So I would love to give some people a little bit of hope. So what would be another word that you would replace fair with that people could kind of say, "Hey, this is my word that I'm going to take with me through my divorce process so that I can have the best experience, possible." Like what would you say to that?
Yeah, I want to get people away from this idea that they have to fight tooth and nail in their divorce process in order to be okay on the other side. I think that the divorce process can be so soul sucking, feeling like we need to make things fair in this process or they'll never be fair, or we need to get justice for what was done against us or revenge. And all of those things, they cost us as much or more than they do the other side if we're attached to them. So I think really the word is pragmatic or maybe workable or feasible. Like you want to see this process as something that's going to make it good enough for you. And then when you close this chapter and you grieve this marriage and you get on to the next step, you are going to be reborn as a new person who has a new outlook on life, who has new opportunity. And as long as you don't let the divorce process take you down, and you do your own self work through it, you can be better off down the road. And it's going to be much better off than maybe that extra teensy bit that you could have gotten if you had fought tooth and nail. So let's be more pragmatic
Mhm.
this process or non-emotional. Yeah, fair can be a very emotional word. Like it's usually associated with some sort of occurrences or experiences that you had during the marriage that you feel like you should get paid back for or made whole from, and it's just not helpful as we
Yeah,
continue to talk.
absolutely, and fair is in the eye of the beholder, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I like those because, the words that you're giving really, they relate to a lot of the conversations that we have about, you know, being able to be flexible and working with your partner and all, when you're pragmatic and when it's workable and when it's feasible, you just have a more grounded approach to what the divorce process is going to look like. Those words feel more grounded to me than fair, because fair is obviously, like we said, that's everybody's definition of fair in each situation is going to be different, and that can cause a lot of emotions if you're not seeing it the same way. So you nailed that answer, Bobby. You nailed
Yeah, well,
it.
and don't get me wrong, like, you still want a lawyer who is savvy, who's a tactician, who's strategic, who's detail oriented, or, can really who navigate this divorce process effectively. Like, don't get a lawyer who's just like, that we're probably not going to do better, take that deal. Like, that's not what we want to do. But people get caught in this trap where they want the pit bull lawyer because they think that's how they make things fair, and ultimately that lawyer can do as much or more damage as the one who's a little bit more laid off than so get the lawyer who's savvy and experienced, but at the same time, when that lawyer tells you it does not make sense to fight over this, take that to heart, because what they're saying is we need to be pragmatic here rather than holding on to this notion of fairness.
Yeah, absolutely, because some things are worth fighting for and some things may not be. You may have to let it go. So that makes sense. All right, so let's keep moving on. Another thing I'd like to talk about when we're talking about fairness is, as we mentioned, there can be a lot of pain in the divorce process, and the levels of pain may be different. One, spouse may have thought everything in the marriage was going fine, and only to find out that the other spouse has been, unfaithful, and, has fallen in love with someone else and moving on. And, it doesn't seem as painful for them. So they almost see the fair as, kind of like a pain trap, if that makes sense. Like, I'm feeling this pain, so I need you to feel the same pain. So let's talk a little bit about that and how that, that pain trap can be a little dangerous too.
Absolutely. Like, you find out about an affair that you had no idea about, and it just breaks you and it breaks your heart and it just crushes you, and you feel this real pain, and you want your spouse to feel the same pain in order to make it fair. And
Mhm.
that is a trap because, one, the court system is not built for revenge. And if you use it that way, it's going to cause you as much pain as anybody else. And two, even if it was, you're not necessarily going to be satisfied when they do feel that pain. It doesn't work that way. Um, so I think we have to be really cautious of litigating from a place of pain, and we have to be able to compartmentalize and kind of grieve on one hand and work through that pain and do that process on your own. I mean, I sometimes the best payback for something like that is empowering yourself and not and going, I don't need you. I don't really care what you do in your life. I'm going to take care of myself, and being unaffected by them. Because usually at this point, the relationship is pretty dysfunctional anyway. And there's probably, you know, there's something going on there either way when that person is gallivanting with their mistress. Like, there is there's probably some pain on that side too, and maybe they're doing something as payback or whatever. Like, it gets really complicated and messy, so you really have to opt out of that entire situation in order not to fall into that equal pain trap.
Yeah. And I mean, does the quote like pain trap, can that backfire on you, from time to time?
Yeah, I mean, it'll backfire because you'll tell your lawyer, like, yeah, I want to do full discovery. I want to file these motions. I don't want to settle on anything. I want to go to every hearing. And that doesn't make you get a better result in court. It makes the judge say, okay, this person is way overly litigious. They want to fight over everything. They're not willing to agree to anything. And especially in the realm of children, that can backfire in a way that means that you can't see your children as much because the judge sees you as someone who's just completely unreasonable and unhinged and not stable in the way that kids need.
Yeah. All right. What about, at times you would see, what would you do if the other side was kind of like stalling to try to give you pain? Like in the first scenario with the person cheating, you're mad because they've hurt you. But what if it's reversed and you're trying to get the divorce done and the other side just keeps stalling to kind of just dig it into you to make it more painful on your end?
Yeah, and this is super common, and unfortunately, it is easy to stall a case without there being any real legal repercussions. Um, so what you need to do is understand that it's common, understand that it's easy, understand that there will be an end. It's not going to be as quickly as you want. Um, there is a process for pushing a case forward, even when the other side is stalling it. Um, and just be patient. I know it's really easier said than done, but the more that you're triggered by that stalling, and maybe you vent towards your lawyer, or you say, you know what, maybe it's because my lawyer isn't moving things along quickly, and then you decide to switch lawyers, and then your new lawyer comes in and he wants or she wants to show you that they mean business, so they start filing all these things. That doesn't necessarily move your case forward. They're just showing you that they mean business now, and you've just spent $5,000-$10,000 more, and you're no
Mm,
closer to the end. So a good lawyer can deal with a stalling opposing party, but it doesn't mean the case is going to be over instantly. So you have to be patient. You have to understand there is a process, there's a way to get through it, but this process isn't over in a matter of weeks or even months. Sometimes a stalling spouse can drag a case out for a year plus, and unfortunately there's no magic wand that we can wave to just get you to the other side of the road.
wow. All right. Well, Bobby, we've covered a lot today, and I think this was a great topic to discuss because I think it's very common to want things to be fair. But I think this is just a great kind of mind reframe, like how to reframe things, and just to be realistic about things that it probably isn't going to be fair. So let's just start to accept that, and then try to move forward and create the best scenario possible, with your ex-spouse. So we are going to continue this conversation, but Bobby, for today, what would kind of be your last, thoughts for everyone before we wrap up?
Again, let's go back to that one word and just remember that's got to be pragmatic, workable, feasible. It's not going to be fair. So we, again, like you said, we want to reset our expectations here. We want to get a savvy legal team, but at the same time, we want to be grounded in our expectations so that we're not misusing this process to try to get revenge and then hurting ourselves as much as or more than the other side.
Yeah. Well, great advice as always, Bobby. Appreciate you so much. And if you are listening or watching out there and you have questions or topics that you would like for us to discuss, please let us know. You can comment below and we will try to cover that in a future episode. And thanks for being here with us today. And we will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.